Okay, so back under the hood here, and a little bit of talk about air conditioners and air conditioning and high pressure hoses. And I really didn't want this to turn into a tutorial about air conditioning and all these gauges and all this, but it may turn into a little bit of one, just out of for safety's sake. So let's start out by showing you the lines under here that we're going to really need to get to, and that's back over here. These two lines here are the air conditioning lines, and these two other lines here are the heater core lines. The evaporator core for the air conditioner and the heater core are both kind of in this little plastic box tucked back between the dash. Well, they're actually kind of in the dash part. That's why you got to pull the dash back to get that heater core and that evaporator core out. The little holes, so the ports, or I guess you should say where you put the hoses on, that's for the heater core come out right here, and then for the evaporator core right here. The evaporator core, where this hooks up here, or for your air conditioner, these lines under a normal functioning situation are pressurized, very, very highly pressurized. And that's another thing. Anytime you're working with any of this stuff is kind of an absolute with gloves. You won't catch me without my gloves on very often when I'm messing with this stuff, because I tend to kind of remember that. So you always be very, very careful when you're working with any kind of air conditioning or high pressure stuff like this kind of stuff. So with that, what we really want to do now is we want to make sure. Let me take the camera off here real quick, and shaky camera alert here, and just show you up close here what we got to do. Okay, these are the two air conditioning lines here. There's our clips right here. You undo these clips a certain way at the bottom, pull the clips off. One of these goes inside the other, so you basically have some aluminum tubing with an O-ring on the outside of it, and then this tubing here slides over the top of it. And then over here you've got your heater core hoses. This one says 11/16. I don't know what the one underneath here is, if it's a 5/8, half inch or what. These have little spring clips, clamps on there. You can get to those with channel lock pliers or a pair of slip joint pliers if they're, you open up the jaws on them to get over that. And that's how those come off. But before we even think about wanting to disconnect this, what we need to do is we need to see how much, if any, pressure is still in the system. And you want to do that for a couple different reasons. First of all, you don't want to be taking air conditioning lines off if they're still pressurized. And second, there is the environment to think about, and you really don't want to waste, if there's too much Freon or anything in there, you really don't want to waste a whole bunch of it. There's no sense in doing that. So what we're going to do is see whether or not there's enough. If you've got a certain amount of Freon in there, you need to take it someplace and have it evacuated. Now, sometimes you might have a vehicle that you buy, maybe the air conditioning, maybe the hose is missing, or maybe the compressor's not on there, or maybe there's obviously no Freon left in the system, right? That you don't have to worry about. But when you've got something like this, that the hoses are all hooked up and there's nothing, obviously disconnected or exploded on it, you want to make sure it's not still pressurized. There are a couple different ways to do that. You could kind of do it if you're pretty sure that it's empty. If you put some gloves on, there's two ports, a high side port, which is this one, and the low side port, which is this one. The low side's the one that you put the Freon in, but we'll get to that way down the road. But back to testing the pressure. If you're really rednecking it, make sure you got some good gloves on. Maybe have a screwdriver that's, bent at a 90 degree or with a pick on the end of it, or just, probably a little bit safer method even than how I'm doing this. But you see what I'm pushing in there? That's just nothing. That's just like some residual pressure in there. Sometimes it can even be just a little bit of air pressure. That's nothing. If that was actually a pressurized air conditioning system, that would just come fogging out of there. And it would be colder than hell, and you would be like, okay, there's still a lot left in there. Like I said, if you push on this and it's very high pressure and you can see it and it's cold, then it's still got a lot in there, and you should take it and have it evacuated. Something a little bit safer than the screwdriver method. Obviously these gauges, but there's another step between these. And that would be one of these cheapo gauges here. These come with Freon to add to your vehicle or to fill your vehicle with, and then they come by themselves too. You can stick one of these on your high pressure side here. This is exactly what you would be doing to fill it. You'd put your bottle of Freon on here. These come with a seal on there. You pull this thing off of there, you put this on the bottle, and you put this thing on there, and this gauge here, it's when you do it when it's running, of course, but you don't need to do that to test to see if there's pressure in here right now. Either or, you can do it with it running or with it off. But you can see here this needle is pretty much zero. And if you pull in on this trigger here, there's just that little residual pressure in there barely coming out of there. So the system's pretty much empty, or it's certainly not fully charged. Now if this needle was way up here or anywhere, if it was way up here or anywhere near the green or anything, then there's probably a lot of stuff still in there, and you should take it and have it evacuated. I do recommend getting these gauges because they're not overly expensive and it is nice to have. These are nice to have because where these types of gauges really shine isn't so much for filling your system. It's really for diagnosing what's wrong with them. There's all kinds of different pressures, and as your air conditioner cycling that these are supposed to read. I'm not an expert by any means on all of that. But the big thing with these over some of these other gauges is this one's got it's got a hose and a gauge for the high side, as to where the other ones just show you the low side pressure. So again, we can put that hose on there and there's really no pressure on there. And we can take and put this one on our low side and there's really nothing going on there. So, if you hear any hissing at all or just a little residual air, you can go ahead and just leave these on there and crack them open until, you should be fine. But again, if you were to plug these in here and these gauges were to go up, or especially this one here, if it's, reading anything in there, then you want to take it in and have it evacuated. Like I said, there are times when you're missing a hose or missing part of the air conditioner, or it's obvious that there's no Freon in there. But you want to make sure for like I said, it's an environmental thing and for safety's sake, because you don't want to try and open up a system that's pressurized unless you test it, and if it's got a lot in there, you don't want to let it all out. So kind of a win-win situation there, really. So and kind of a necessary thing when you're working on air conditioners. It's just if you know what you're doing, or even if you're learning, you will save more than enough money repairing your own air conditioner to make it worthwhile taking it in and having the old stuff evacuated. So like I said, kind of a win-win situation there. So okay, once again, we're pretty much sure that this thing doesn't have anything in it. We've checked it a couple different ways. We checked it with the screwdriver method. We checked it with the cheapy gauge here, and then with these here. So it's probably pretty safe to unhook those hoses right there and undo that. And then from that point on, we'll focus on the inside again. So with that, stick with me.
Mm.